Yesterday morning, over 3,000 people gathered at Liberty Plaza in New York City in the early hours after it was announced the day before by Mayor Bloomberg that the NYPD would be evicting all protesters from the park. The whole world was able to watch through a live stream online by independent broadcasters, whilst the mainstream news networks failed to cover this. Over 300,000 Americans signed petitions to stop the eviction and flooded the 311 phone. And what happened? The mayor asked for the police to stand down. It was a victory for peaceful protesters. The battle was won, but the war is far from over. Whilst many peacefully march around the world right now, riots have broken out in Italy's capital, Rome. So the question is this: can the Occupy Wall Street campaign be won on peaceful means alone, or is violence needed for the politicians to listen? You are listening to Myles Dyer. It is Saturday, October 15th. Welcome to Podcast 376. Hello everyone, thank you for tuning in. Welcome all previous listeners, and if you are new, a super welcome. If it's your first time, I hope you choose to stay around. Podcast 376 has grown incredibly since the first episode of this new series, which was released a few days ago. And actually I've created a YouTube channel now, which I think will gain a lot of new listeners, and especially on youtube.com/podcast376. On the channel page is a box where you can submit questions and topics for discussion, and then you can vote on ones that have been suggested by other people, and whatever ones are most popular I can broadcast on this show. And today's comment comes from Applesinken, who is from Germany. He said, "Your thoughts on the violence in Rome during the Occupy demonstration." Now, anyone who's been following the stories with Occupy Together, or this global revolution, today, October 15th, was the day that was planned for people all across the world to occupy their local streets and banks to make a stand against corporate greed. Now, it made me laugh today when a lot of the mainstream news television networks were now reporting on this, saying, you know, these protesters are against alleged corporate greed. It's alleged, you know, corporate greed. I think it's very clear that it's not alleged, it's actual corporate greed, and once more shows what a complete joke and how this information is soaked in so much agenda. And even the BBC news channel, that's funded by the government, which I guess says something, when they reported as the main story about this global protest, the footage they used was from Rome, where there were cars on fire. And this was the dominating story today, not those protesting on the streets of London or at Occupy Wall Street, because there it has been peaceful. And this is why I think the discussion of violence and whether it works is an interesting one, because let's go back to Thursday night. Mayor Bloomberg had announced that the police were going to Liberty Square in New York City to clear up the settlement for Occupy Wall Street, when actually it had been quite tidy anyway. They were going to clean it up in thirds, which meant that all the tents had to be packed up, and then the police were supposedly going to let them have it again with new laws and legislation to say it's private property, so you're not allowed sleeping bags there anymore, and you're not allowed tents. And of course the protesters knew this was an attempt to shut down the movement, so they had the communications team sending out messages to people all across the world to sign petitions, to call Mayor Bloomberg and all the council. And it was incredible because on Friday morning, I was in work and I had the live stream in the corner of my laptop screen as I was working, watching thousands of people stand up to the police as they turned up, chanting all their slogans. It was just so inspiring. And effectively they were saying, look, if you want to evict us, you'll have to arrest us first. And although they have many cable ties to arrest the protesters as they have in the past, I don't think they were really planning on arresting 3,000 people. So it was called off. They stepped down. It was just remarkable, because this peaceful protest had won. But unfortunately, the question then becomes, where do they go from here? Because they took all their brooms, they went on a march down Wall Street with sweeping the streets, saying, we're cleaning up Wall Street. It was amazing. And then violence did break out because of police brutality. There are videos online. There was a policeman who grabbed this guy and knocked him out cold. This guy was just walking. He turned him around and punched him in the face. The videos are on YouTube. And then there was another couple walking up the streets in Wall Street, and two security grabbed them. They said, what have we done? They said it in more colourful terms than that. And then they got thrown to the floor. It was just outrageous, and obviously the press had said, protesters have got violent, because media gets attracted to violence because it's something you can paint a great picture of. It's something you can throw on the front page. You can have people just standing there with signs and that, which works. But if you can have cars on fire, if you can have blood, then that's going to make the better story. And, most of these newspapers and television stations are funded by the corporations which these people are protesting against. So, of course, they have an agenda. So, my question is this. Does violence work? Because in Rome at the moment, there has been tear gas and water cannon from the police, people throwing all sorts of objects at the police officers. They're angry and they're frustrated. And it's just absolute chaos. And a lot of people say to me, sure, protesting peacefully is good, but nothing will get done until there is anarchy. And a part of me feels maybe that is the case. Maybe it will take violence to break out. But I still think it's better to stay peaceful and just build up the numbers, because I don't know, I'm at confliction here, because let me just be honest with how I feel about this. I think that the Occupy Wall Street movement is going to get a lot more momentum if someone gets seriously injured or killed. If there's a police shooting, then it will cause mass outrage, and I think will make the movement grow exponentially even more, because that's what's been happening in the Arab Spring. People peacefully protest, and then when the government tried to suppress them, which is happening in the US at the moment and has actually been happening in London today. These people were going to the stock exchange and there was already kettling, which is where the police corner them, surround them and compact them together. And the Met Police were saying today via Twitter that there were missiles being thrown, which I don't think was the case. And I actually tweeted back to the police, which was a very surreal occurrence, saying, look, if you use a kettle, the water inside it boils, which was a term a friend had said to me before, which I think is so very, very true. And it's like a standoff. There may have to be some form of violence to cause outrage. And I think the protesters... Do you think the protesters want the police to be more violent to get their voices heard? Because there have been some independent journalists, after being beaten by police, thanking the police for promoting their cause. And so I wonder if deep down inside people are like, yeah, we do want this violence to build up, because that's the only way the world is going to listen, because that is how the mainstream media works. Because whether we like it or not, although I'm against using the mainstream media for getting your information, I think things won't change until the mainstream media does take side with the protesters, or at least start asking the government to put an end to this, because the governments are traditional and therefore need traditional means to put them in their place. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. Is violence needed? Or can peaceful protest win all the way? And I always find it an interesting dichotomy, if that's the right word, where people complain about protesters who are being peaceful, saying they're not doing anything, they're just bitching, why don't they stop bitching and take some action? And then, they'll be the same people that will complain if protesters become violent, and they'll say, oh, look at them, they're just people trying to cause trouble. It's like, so what how do these protesters take action? And there have been some people saying, look, well, government having an elected official is the way that it's always worked best, so try and get elected. No, the whole reason they are protesting is the political system has failed. The people who get elected in office are people who have the most money backing them, who get lobbied by the biggest corporations. Actually, Republicans and Democrats, if you look at the catalogue of companies that have lobbied them, a lot of them are the same. It's just absolutely incredible. So you may get a sense of uncertainty from me, and that's the truth. I think it's just distinguishing wanting something to happen and knowing it perhaps is the only way it's going to work effectively. So to explain that probably in better terms, I don't want violence to break out. I want peaceful protests to be the solution to the world's problems. But also, I feel the only way people are going to be listened to is if violence breaks out. And that kind of means I want police brutality to spark more anger, but then am I promoting chaos? I don't want chaos. I am so conflicted right now, and I guess that's why I want to ask you for your thoughts, because it's just insane what's happening in the world at the moment. But more people are waking up to it, and people are discussing it, which is great. So sorry if that hasn't been a very coherent podcast today, but the question is simply this: is violence needed for Occupy Wall Street and the Occupy Together movement around the world to win their battle? So on that note, I thank you for listening. You can contact me via Twitter at Podcast376. If you have Facebook, facebook.com/Podcast376. And if you have iTunes, you can find Podcast376 on there. Please be sure to leave a rating and a review. I'm always interested to hear your thoughts on the show itself, not just the issues. And please check out the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Podcast376. The feature on the channel in which you can submit questions and topics for discussion is amazing. Seriously, check it out and submit all you want and vote on all the other suggestions. And I will see you next time on Podcast 376.